Primaries continue to happen all over the U.S. leading up to the midterms, and last night was a primary in West Virginia, where Joe Manchin went up against Paula Jean Swearengin. So Joe Manchin is the conservative Democrat that, is most likely the most conservative Democrat in the Democratic Party. And Paula Jean Swearengin is a challenger who is a Justice Democrat, takes no corporate PAC money, raises the majority of her donations off of small donors, actually has a platform for the people, a progressive platform, and she lost. She lost, unfortunately, and it was, it appears to be a big gap. So Joe Manchin won with 70% or about 70% of the vote, and Paula Jean got 30% of the vote. Now, this result, while disappointing, isn't really surprising. So Paula Jean Swearengin didn't raise a lot of money, and it's because she doesn't take corporate PAC money. When you're Joe Manchin and you just open yourself up to anybody who wants to give you money, corporations who want to sway you in your votes, then you're going to raise more money. And raising more money means you can put your ads everywhere. It means you get on television. It means you get written up in the news. So because of the way the system currently works, Paula Jean Swearengin doesn't get the attention that she deserves. An activist, an environmental activist from West Virginia who hasn't run in a race before, who isn't attached to, big names or corporate money, she's not going to get the attention. She's not going to get on MSNBC like Joe Manchin is every week. She's not going to get that. And when you have a lot of older voters, especially in West Virginia, who watch television, who get their news that way, they know who Joe Manchin is. I mean, especially because he is the incumbent. So already you're up against a wall of somebody who has a built-in name in the state. And it's tough for an activist with little money to defeat that, at least the first time, and at least in a Senate race. House races are a lot easier to defeat an opponent like this, but a Senate race is a big race. And for a first-time politician, it's even tougher. But look, I'm going to break down 3 different ways why I think, or what there is to learn from this race. So I'm going to look at the money that was raised, a past results for Joe Manchin, and historical precedent. So first, let's go to the money. Now, first, before I show you the money that was raised by Manchin and Paula Jean Swearengin, I want you to take a look at these results. So look at the Democratic primary compared to the Republican primary. So Paula Jean Swearengin, even though she only got 30% of the vote in the Democratic primary, she received more votes than any Republican. Now, you may not think that's super impressive until you look at the money that was raised. So Joe Manchin, of course, raised the most money. Blankenship actually spent the most money, but Joe Manchin was a close second. But look at the bottom of the list. So all these Republicans and Joe Manchin raised in the millions. Paula Jean Swearengin had about 5% of what Joe Manchin raised in where she spent. And still, with only spending 5% of what Joe Manchin spent, she received the second most amount of votes in this primary. Now, any way you cut that, that's impressive. For an activist who has no corporate money, who's taken so little money, who has very little, if any, actual coverage of her in the news, this isn't a terrible result. Now, look, I can't sugarcoat this and pretend, this is amazing. Oh my God, Paula Jean Swearengin did so well. No, obviously, she lost. It sucks. But you have to understand that this is a process. It takes time to build a movement. You can't win this stuff overnight. It takes time. So as a first step, as her first run, this is impressive. And when looking at a past result from Joe Manchin, it's even more impressive. So in 2012, Joe Manchin faced up against, her name is Cheryl Fletcher. So Cheryl Fletcher in the Democratic primary, where Joe Manchin received about 80% of the vote. Cheryl Fletcher, only 20%. So that's 20% for Fletcher compared to Paula Jean Swearengin, who received 30%. Now, you may think, oh, whatever, maybe she wasn't interesting. Cheryl Fletcher was a known quantity in West Virginia. She is a former GOP delegate and was endorsed by the National Right to Life Committee, an anti-choice group, and the NRA. She was supported by two massive conservative organizations. So Fletcher ran to Joe Manchin's right, if you knew that was possible. So Cheryl Fletcher essentially ran as a right-wing Republican against Joe Manchin in the Democratic primary. And the result shows you that that didn't work out too well for her. And she had run before. So this is somebody who was known, who was a politician, who had ran in races before. And still, only 20%. So look, understand, even though Paula Jean Swearengin, or because Paula Jean Swearengin didn't have the backing of these types of large groups like the NRA, which, you know, obviously Swearengin wouldn't have that type of backing, but Fletcher having that backing, you'd think it would benefit her. And maybe it did. Maybe that's what got her the 20%. But Paula Jean has none of that, has no big groups like that, has no massive money coming in from like the National Rifle Association, no groups like that giving her money. And still was able to get 10% more than Fletcher did in a race against Joe Manchin, where Fletcher was already known in the state. Now, let's look at so the third way I tried to break this down, but really you can't break this down, is historical precedent. There is no historical precedent. I have no more graphs to show you. There is, what Paula Jean Swearengin is doing here is she's blazing a trail. This is an activist running for a Senate seat. This isn't done. So understand that this is a movement. This is the start of something. As these candidates like Paula Jean Swearengin continue to run in their state and build up their name recognition and maybe get some media attention, they're going to be able to get the attention they need to eventually win a race. So while this result was disappointing, remember that this was just the beginning. Hey, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider throwing me a few bucks on Patreon at patreon.com/therationalnational or therationalnational.com/join.